Well, folks, this is the last video you'll have to watch of me in my living room. I know you'll miss them, but every good thing has to come to an end, and so it is for our videos. As we get ready for our final examination, I want to talk to you just for a couple of minutes about taking essay exams. One of the things that students often tell me, and this is borne out by my experience in reading essay exams, is that students don't like taking essay exams and they're not very good at taking them. In a lot of ways, that's not surprising. If you think about your experience coming up through grade school and high school, and maybe even in some of your college classes, what you have done is taken a whole lot of standardized tests. Whether you realize it or not, you are all experts at taking multiple choice examinations. You have done them for your entire academic life, and they have been the high stakes exams by which not only you were evaluated, but so were your teachers and so were your schools. So over the years, you've taken a lot of them, people have taught you how to take them, and you're really good at them. There is no school funding that's awarded for how well you do on essay exams. As a result, students typically come to college and they don't do very well on essay exams. And that's what we're going to talk about today, ways that you can do better on them. So when they talk to professors and they say, why do students do badly on examinations? The number one answer that professors will give is that students do not answer the question that was given. They create some text, they write something, but it doesn't address the question that was given. And I want to talk about two dynamics there. One is the dynamic from the student side, and the other is the dynamic from the professor's side, the fellow who's reading it or the person who's reading it. From the student side, there's a strange psychological dynamic, and to some degree we have all experienced it, where we are much more aware of what we don't know than we are aware of what we do know. We will tend, when we look at a question, to read it in terms of what we don't know. And this is especially true in high stress situations like a final exam that might be worth 30 or 40% of your final grade. If it's a history class and you're responsible for reading five books and you've only read four of them, you can bet that your tendency will be to read that essay question in terms of the book that you didn't read. Now, think about that. You get a double whammy. On the one hand, you're not answering the question that was posed to you. So you're already in the hole. And secondly, you're trying to answer it from what you don't know. This is a dynamic that happens all the time. Many years ago, when I was living in the Midwest, the small school that I was working for got this grant, and the idea was to help people who were on welfare move into the workplace. My job was to work with these folks and teach them to write resumes and also interview for jobs. And what I found is a lot of these folks had terrific work experience, they had a lot of skills, but invariably when we would do the mock interviews, within the first 30 seconds, they would tell me why they shouldn't be hired. And then we'd watch the video and we'd go over and I'd say, why did you tell me that? They say, I don't know. It's just what I was thinking. We are 1,000 times more aware of what we don't know. We're more aware of our weaknesses. We're more aware of what we are, where we see ourselves as being vulnerable than we are of our strengths. So the first thing you need to do is make sure you read that question really carefully and make sure that you are answering the question. Overcome and you can overcome this partially by just knowing that you're susceptible to it. Make sure you're not answering it in terms of what you don't know. Answer it in terms of what you do know and answer the question. Okay, that's one dynamic. That's the student side. Now there's the professor side. So let's imagine it's not a spring semester, but a typical fall semester, and your professors are getting ready to grade your examinations. Now, the truth is, they've got all kinds of stuff going on in their lives, just as you do. They've got Christmas shopping, they've got all the social events, they may have things to do in their faith communities. They've got all the stuff going on that you have. And they have a deadline. You've just gotten over your deadlines, getting those final projects in and taking the exams. Now your professors are up against a deadline. They have a whole bunch of grading to do, they have final grades to calculate, and they have very little time. So they'll do things like they'll sit down at their desk and they've got a stack of papers that's this tall, And they'll say to themselves, okay, when I have graded an inch of these blue books, when that pile is 1 inch shorter, then I will allow myself to go to the bathroom. They are bored. They're under stress. They've got to get these things graded, and they're working as quickly as they possibly can. If you hide your brilliance, are they likely to find it? No. Now, maybe on a paper that you turned in midway through the semester, they might have more time. Things are more relaxed. They're going to look and see if they're going to nurture that paper and see if there's brilliance hidden underneath those words. But on an examination, they've got to get through another inch of them before they'll even let themselves pee. If you've got brilliance and it's hidden, it's not going to be found. So, keeping those dynamics in mind, your tendency to answer the question in terms of what you don't know, and the fact that your professors are probably reading these things very quickly, and if there is brilliance there, they need to be shown that brilliance. Keep those two dynamics in mind. We can come up with some strategies for taking effective exams. Here's what most students do and what I don't want you to do. They see the exam, they stress about it for a second, and then within 30 seconds of having read the exam, they start writing. They don't have a plan. They don't know what they're writing. They're just writing. They know they have to create text, and by God, they create some text. They write what I call the one big paragraph. It doesn't really have any form. It doesn't give the reader any direction. It's just kind of this word salad. And then they look at it. They know it's bad, but they don't know what to do. And maybe they go back and they cross something out and they start putting those carets with a line up here to some sentence that nobody can make any sense of. Then they decide they'll rewrite it, but they still don't have a plan. So they cross it all out. Now they're just wasting time. Then they rewrite it, and the second version's as dumb as the first version. Then, because they think if they leave the exam too early, they haven't suffered enough and maybe that'll hurt their grade, they sit there and stare at this mess that they've made and they just feel bad about themselves. They hand it in sheepishly, walk out the door, and hope they never have to see the professor again. They probably knew a lot about the subject, they never gave themselves a chance to express it. They never did the kinds of things that you learned in 101 and that you've learned a little bit more about in 102, and that is to break writing down into a process, right? So we know when you're writing something, you have your pre-writing. I hate that term. You can't pre-write any more than you can pre-eat your breakfast. When you're preparing what you're going to write, when you're doing your research and your brainstorming, that's part of writing. But I don't have a better word, so we'll call it pre-writing. You have your pre-writing, then you have your drafting, and then you have your revision. And you guys know, if you've been paying attention, that when you're doing a longer paper, the part where you actually spend the least amount of time is in the drafting. You spend especially on research papers, you spend a tremendous amount of time gathering the information, thinking about it, organizing it, coming up with some kind of a plan. You spend a relatively small amount of time, maybe about 15% of the writing process actually writing it, and then you spend a tremendous amount of time revising, rethinking, polishing, reimagining, all of that work. On an essay exam, you don't have that kind of time. Let's say it's a 1 hour examination. You've got the objective part in the beginning, and then you've got this 45-minute essay that you have to write. To create enough text is probably going to take you about 30-35 minutes, writing at a relaxed pace, which is how I'm going to tell you you should write. Uh, that gives you somewhere around 15 minutes. It's not a lot of time for pre-writing, and it's not a lot of time for revision. But you can give yourself 5 minutes. And when you're taking a test, not putting something on paper for 5 minutes will seem like an eternity. But you can take 5 minutes to organize ideas, and in the 10 minutes that are left, you don't have time to do a whole lot of revision, but you have time to shift gears, do some proofreading, fill in missing words, add a few details, make it a little bit better. Let's talk about that 5 minutes that you have for pre-writing. Read the question. Make sure you understand what it's asking. And in that time, you can probably formulate a thesis statement. Is it going to be your best sentence? No. Your most nuanced sentence? It doesn't have to be. It just has to be serviceable. And remember, your professor needs to get through these exams quickly so he can get the grades into the registrar's office. Most of your classmates are going to produce that one big paragraph that doesn't say anything, and your professor will be looking through that. Is there something here I can give some points to? If it's worth 50 points on the examination, fine, I'll give it 20 points. I don't know what it says, but you don't want to be that, but that's what they're going to be hit with. You want your exam to stand out. Remember, your reader is tired. Take the reader by the hand. In your thesis statement, replicate the language of the question. If it's a class that says, define 3 principal economic structures that could govern a modern society and determine which one is the most effective, replicate the language. 3 economic systems that we find in modern society are, and state them. The one that I find most effective for most modern industrial societies is, and state it. Replicate the language. You have time in 5 minutes to form a thesis statement using some of the language of the prompt that will show the person reading your exam that you're one of the few students who's actually answering the question that was given. You will also have time in those 5 minutes to develop a rough outline of where this paper is going. And you can think of that as being a paragraph outline. Now, do you have time to do the big Roman numerals and then the capital letters and the small? No, nobody does that anyway. You don't have time to do that anytime. There is always something in life better than making that kind of an outline. Nobody does it. But what you do have time to do is to make an outline of the main points that you want to raise. And you have time to think of a draft topic sentence for each one of those points, and you have time to sketch out a couple of examples that will show that you really have a mastery of the material that's covered. Details matter. If there is that date swimming in the back of your head that you remember, if there is even the publisher of the scholarly book that you read, put those details in. It shows the level of engagement that you have with the material. For those topic sentences to the questions, this is not the kind of polished, finished writing that you're going to be doing in a paper that you have a week, 2 weeks to work on. This is something that is done quickly and that it has to be done efficiently. With the topic sentence, replicate the language of your thesis statement, which replicates the language of the prompt that you were given, the question that you were given. College writing teachers spend forever trying to break students out of writing those silly 5-paragraph essays. But there are tricks that you learned in writing those that can help you with essay examinations. And if you think about what's so boring with those 5-paragraph essays, is they just seem to keep repeating the same language. What would hurt you on a finished essay can be serviceable and helpful for you when you're writing an essay examination, especially for a reader who is tired and needs to be reminded that you are one of the few students who's actually answering the question that's been given. Drafting. This is when you're actually going to be writing it. If you are a person whose handwriting, and I am this kind of a person, whose handwriting tends to be sloppy, who sometimes has who finds writing, especially in script, not to be especially comfortable. Before you take your examinations, buy a couple of blue books if blue books are required for you during a normal semester. What you'll find with those is the paper is kind of waxy and it works better with some pens than others. Blue books cost about 15 cents. Buy a couple. Experiment with a few different pens. Find the pen that you write comfortably with. It actually can make a big difference in the quality of your writing if you're not worried about the ink smearing. It can make your experience more relaxed and more comfortable. That will mean you'll write better. Make yourself, especially when you are writing under pressure and you're trying to get as many words out as you can, make yourself slow down and prevent yourself from writing really small. That's what we tend to do sometimes when we're trying to write very quickly. Visually, what that communicates to your reader is that you're working nervously. Do we appear to be in control of the material that we're saying when we appear nervous? No. You want to appear confident. You want to appear that you are relaxed and you know this material so well that you're just able to talk your way through it like you were talking about something that you do every day that you love. If you're a baseball player, like you're talking about what it's like to be a baseball player. That's the kind of control that you want to communicate to your reader. So find the pen that works with you and make yourself, while you're drafting, make yourself write slowly. In the time that you have, you can produce an awful lot of text, believe me. Most students don't run out of time on the essay exams. They run out of things to say. Make yourself write slowly and make yourself write neatly. I would recommend, if you're allowed to write on every other line. That makes what you've written easier to read. It also makes it easier for you to make some small changes, which is all you have time to do with revision. One thing you should not do, and I see students do this every semester. There's some historical figure's name, and you think you've spelled it correctly, but you're not sure. So you put a parenthesis and then a little SP and a question mark. Why do you people do that? If you misspelled it, I might not have noticed. If I look at it and it looks like it's spelled correctly, but I'm not sure, then I've got to look it up. And if you spelled it right, then I'm ticked off because I've wasted time. If you didn't spell it right, then I feel I got to take some points off because you spelled it wrong. Why are you calling attention to what you don't know? Don't do that. Just write it. When you're finished with your draft, resist the temptation, if you have that temptation, to cross it all out and start over again. The second version is not going to be any better. In the same way, resist the temptation to start moving paragraphs around with brackets and arrows. You'll just confuse the reader. What you do have time to do in the 10 minutes or so that are left at the end of that time that you've given yourself to write that essay, you have time to carefully proofread what you've written, to correct obvious errors, and maybe to add some small details. You're going to have to give yourself a second to shift gears, though. When you're trying to produce 6, 7, 8 paragraphs of text in half an hour, whether you realize it or not, your heart rate's going to increase. You're going to your blood pressure is going to go up. You're going to have some adrenaline running through your system as you do just taking examinations, and you're going to be working really, really quickly, far faster actually than you realize you are. If you proofread while you're still in that mindset, there will be things like words that are missing just because you were writing so quickly. You'll never see them. You'll read for what you meant to put there, not what's there. So do whatever you have to do to calm yourself down. If it's a breathing exercise, if it's a minute or two of mindfulness or meditation, all that stuff works. Whatever it takes for you to do it, bring yourself to a place where you can read what you've written slowly and deliberately. You've heard me with papers tell you over and over again, read your writing aloud. You'll hear things you don't see. You can't do that in an examination room, but you can read it very deliberately so that you're sounding out every word in your mind. Fix the obvious stuff. Fix what's wrong. On facts, just like on a multiple choice test, it's probably not best to second guess yourself. If your first guess about who wrote something is probably better than your second guess. But fix the obvious grammatical things. Fix missing words. If you can remember a date, remember a detail, pencil it in. Okay, so when you're taking your exam with me, I want you to practice this. And I, of course, have no way of knowing what you're going to be doing. And because it's online, you'll be doing it from a keyboard rather than writing it out by hand. So, the stuff about blue books and pens doesn't really apply. But I want you to look at the prompt. There'll be a short reading that you have to do. Before you start writing, I want you to spend at least a few minutes formulating a thesis statement that replicates the language of the prompt that I've given you. I want you to form an outline of some ideas and topics. And then I want you to write your essay. And what I'm going to be looking for is evidence that you can use those skills and create a serviceable text that shows me that you are in command of the material. So I want to see multiple paragraphs. I want to see a thesis statement. And I want to see you taking me by the hand and leading me through your essay to show me that you have answered the question that I've given. And part of that will mean actually replicating the language that I've given you. Okay, if you have any questions, call, text, or email. I'll be happy to help you. I look forward to getting your last papers, and the exam will be available on Blackboard on Wednesday at 11:45, our regularly scheduled time for the examination. If you have trouble logging into Blackboard, do not panic. I'll be watching email and I'll be watching my phone. Contact me. I'll send you all the material over email and you can submit it that way. Okay? Take care, everyone, and good luck on all of your exams.